अस्सलामुअलैकुम। तो मुझे लगता है कि हम ना लाइव हो चुके हैं। तो डे 6 टेलविंड सीएसएस के साथ मूव रजिस्टर्स में आप सब लोगों को वेलकम करते हैं। अभी तो कोई भी नहीं है खैर, लेकिन वेलकम हम कर रहे हैं। मान लो यार, कर रहे हैं वेलकम। हाँ, बस कर रहे हैं। कोई भी नहीं है तो क्या हो गया, हम तो अपना काम कर रहे हैं। तो बात ये हुई है कि ना, बेसिकली आप देख रहे होंगे कि इस टाइम पे आज टेलविंड जो सीएसएस की वो लैब है ना, लैब कह रहा हूँ, अपनी जो हमारी प्ले लिस्ट है उसके अंदर हम रिकॉर्ड करवा रहे हैं। क्योंकि वजह ये बनी है कि आपको दिखाते हैं। यहाँ पे आए ना ज़रा, ये देख रहे हैं कोड डैम प्रो को। ये प्रो मैंने ख़रीदा नहीं है, बेसिकली आपको दिखा देते हैं। ये ना डैशबोर्ड पे लेके जाता हूँ आप लोगों को। ये बेसिकली मेहुल भैया और कोड डैम वालों ने ना कहा है कि बच्चों की मदद करते हैं, तो कोड फेस्ट लाया उन्होंने। तो गेट योर फ्री प्रो सब्सक्रिप्शन, तो 3 दिनों के लिए इन्होंने ना फ्री कर दी है सब्सक्रिप्शन। इन्होंने कहा लो भाई पढ़ो, मौज करो, यशी करो। तो इसके लिए ना बेसिकली हम आए हैं इसके ऊपर कि चलो यार ज़रा थोड़ा सा ये करते हैं। तो इसमें हमारा प्रो हो गया, तो अब उस प्रो की वजह से ना ये हमारा पाथ था, स्टार्ट द लर्निंग पाथ बैक एंड वेब डेवलपमेंट। नहीं, ये नहीं था हमारा, तो है फ्रंट एंड, ये वाला हमारा। तो जो 20% हो चुका है, तो ये मैं आपको दिखाता हूँ। हम हैं तकरीबन मास्टरिंग रिएक्ट जेएस में, ये देख लो। तो अभी ये रिएक्ट के अंदर ना, ये इसको टैब में खोलते हैं और साथ टेलविंड भी खोल लेते हैं। तो रिएक्ट क्वेरी फॉर नेटवर्क रिक्वेस्ट और एडवांस रिएक्ट हुक्स, एडवांस रिएक्ट कंसेप्ट और 5 रिएक्ट प्रोजेक्ट्स। एडवांस थ्योरेटिकल जावास्क्रिप्ट तो फ्री है, तो इसको बंद कर देते हैं। अब ये देखें कि लर्न रिएक्ट रेटिंग जो है ना, ये हम कर रहे हैं बेसिकली कोर्स। और ये हमारा तकरीबन हो गया है। टू डू ऐप हमने कर ली थी ना, और कोडियन प्रैक्टिस भी कर लिया था। रिएक्ट क्विज ये सारे प्रोजेक्ट हैं। रिएक्ट बर्थडे रिमाइंडर प्रोजेक्ट है, टिकटॉक यूआई क्लोन है, फिर राउटिंग इंट्रोडक्शन है। तो ये सारी चीज़ें हैं ना, जो राउटिंग इंट्रोडक्शन, ये बस बेसिकली हमने करना है राउटिंग इंट्रोडक्शन। लेकिन ये भी हमने कर लिया हुआ है। राउटर्स हमें पता क्या होते हैं, और वो राउट्स और राउटर के अंदर वो सारा आ जाता है एक ही पेज पे रहते हुए। हम वो डिफरेंट अपने पेज के कंपोनेंट्स को बेसिकली ना राउट कर देते हैं। तो ये फिर रिएक्ट का एक और प्रोजेक्ट है, और फिर ये रिएक्ट का एक और प्रोजेक्ट है। तो प्रोजेक्ट्स तो ना हम कर लेंगे ये, क्योंकि फ्री भी है। लेकिन अभी हमें ना जो कोड डैम ने बेसिकली दिया है, उन्होंने कहा, और अगर आपका दिल करे बाद में ख़रीदने का तो आप उसको ख़रीद लीजिएगा। तो ख़रीद तो बेसिकली ना मैंने रात ओपन किया था, तो 60% ऑफ था तकरीबन। 7 घंटे के बाद ना 1 मिनट कम होता जा रहा, 1% कम होता जा रहा। तो मैंने कोई 10 घंटे के बाद स्टार्ट किया, तो 61% था तब। तो वो टोटल पड़ रहा था साल की सब्सक्रिप्शन मुझे 6,000 में। लेकिन टोटल पैसे 5,000 थे, और मुझे अभी ज़रूरत भी है उनकी। तो मैं ईद भी आने वाली है, तो रोज़े आपको पता चल रहे हैं। तो इन शॉर्ट यानी कि ना, इसको गेड़ते हैं। गेड़ना मतलब पंजाबी में लफ्ज़ होता है, मैंने कहा गेड़ते हैं ना तो पानी निकलता है। तो इसको यानी कि 3 दिन यूटिलाइज़ करते हैं। तो ये रिएक्ट वाले को तो हम दोबारा भी कर लेंगे, प्रोजेक्ट्स ही करने हैं, कंसेप्ट तो हमने कर लिए हैं। बाद आ जाता है टेलविंड। ये वैसे ही प्रो कोर्स है, ठीक है। तो ये हमें परचेज़ करना पड़ना था, तो ये हम इसी के अंदर कर लेते हैं। तो स्टार्ट योर कोर्स करें आज हम। टेलविंड वैसे तो हमने की हुई है, तो हम देखेंगे जल्दी जल्दी इसको, सारी कोर्सेज़ को जो एक्सरसाइज है वो अंदर करेंगे, ताकि ज़रा हाथ भी सेट हो जाए। तो ये सीन है सारा। और इसके बाद ना हमने यानी कि ये एडवांस रिएक्ट हुक्स कोर्स है। इसमें देखते हैं क्या क्या है जी। इसमें यूज स्टेट है, डिटेल है। ये यूज स्टेट तो हमने देख लिया था, यूज फैक्ट भी देख लिया था, लेकिन इसको दोबारा से देखेंगे। फिर यूज़ रेफ है, यूज़ कॉल बैक एंड यूज़ मेमो है। तो ये यानी कि हुक्स हैं बेसिकली, एडवांस हुक्स सारे। हुक्स का पहले बताएंगे हुक्स होती क्या हैं, ठीक है। ये देखो, हुक्स इंट्रोडक्शन, एनवायरनमेंट, सेटअप। तो ये ज़रा बेसिकली एडवांस हुक्स हैं थोड़ी सी। ये देख रहे हैं सारी यूज़ रेफ की और यूज़ मेमो, यूज़ कॉल बैक, कॉन्टेक्स्ट एपीआई, यूज़ कॉन्टेक्स्ट, सिंपल कस्टम हुक। तो कोशिश करते हैं कि ये 3 दिनों में ना ये चीज़ें सारी ना हम कर लें। एडवांस रिएक्ट कॉन्सेप्ट्स आ गए और फिर भी इसमें क्या है जी, इसमें है डिस्ट्रक्चरिंग प्रॉप्स है, सिंपल स्टेट मशीन्स है, सिंपल मशीन एग्जांपल विद एचटीटीपीएस है, कंपाउंड कंपोनेंट्स हैं, फिर कंपाउंड कंपोनेंट्स विद शेयर स्टेट है, लॉन्ग डिसलाइन कस्टम कंपोनेंट्स हैं। तो यूजिंग कंपाउंड कंपोनेंट्स इंडिविजुअली, तो ये थोड़े से कंसेप्ट हैं, ये प्रो है बेसिकली, वरना फिर हमें ख़रीदना पड़ेगा या फिर ये कहीं और से सीखने पड़ेंगे। तो इसलिए ना हमने कोशिश है कि इस बात को हमारा जल्दी जल्दी पूरा करना है। फिर ये 5 प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं, तो ये प्रोजेक्ट्स और वो वाले प्रोजेक्ट्स मिल के कर लेंगे। इसमें से मेरे ख्याल से ये वाली तो हमने कर ली भी है, टू डू लिस्ट एप्लीकेशन। बाकी ये 4 वीडियो गेम एपीआई है, तो वीडियो गेम बनाएंगे कोई, सर्चिंग गेम, डिस्प्लेइंग द गेम्स, फिनिशिंग सर्च सेक्शन, क्रिएटिंग द डील सेक्शन। तो ये इस तरह का ना, यानी कि ये 5 प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं। तो देखते हैं, मेरे ख्याल से यहाँ तक तो मुश्किल ही कौन सा होगा। 3 दिन है, कल मैंने ऑन कर लिया था इसको, गलती ये हुई तो कल बस मैं इसको देखता ही रहा हूँ। तो एक दिन तकरीबन हमारा होने वाला। ये फंक्शंस का भी है 50 डेज़ का ना, वेलकम टू 4 टाइम्स 50 डेज़ ऑफ जावास्क्रिप्ट। तो ये तो मेरे ख्याल से शायद ये भी प्रो में ही हो, तो इसको भी देखेंगे इंशाल्लाह ताला। तो अभी हम टेलविंड से शुरू करते हैं जल्दी जल्दी से। नोट्स तो हमने बनाए हुए हैं हैरी भाई के देख के, तो हैरी भाई के नोट्स में थोड़ा सा अगर कुछ और नई बात बताएंगे
Hey
तो इसको
everyone,
हम
welcome to
एडजस्ट
the
कर
very
लेंगे।
first video, very
इसको
first
हम ना
section in
1.5
Tailwind
पे
CSS
चलाएंगे।
version 3, of course, and this is an interactive code and board. So hopefully you can also see a playground behind you, behind this video, where you will be able to practice what we are doing in this video as it is, as we are working towards an end goal. But the point of this tutorial, the things which I want to discuss in this video is just the basics of what we are doing in this course, what Tailwind is, what we will be doing, and how you can practice using programs making mistakes. So Tailwind is an interesting framework for CSS which allows you to pack your UI and your styling of the UI into the HTML itself, right? So the traditional way of working with CSS is something like you give it a class of hello, let's say, and then you go to your CSS file, let's say you create one, CSS, you create a file, and then you say hello, then you give it a background of yellow, something like that. You go back to the HTML, you link the CSS, like link, let's see, link well, style sheet, href, style.css. And then your styles automatically start reflecting once you put in some content over here, as you can see. So this way is fine, but what Tailwind allows you to do is that it restricts your ability in a way to use a certain number of styles only. Now, what do I mean by that? And this is also not a fully true statement, but let's say I wanted to create a nice looking button over here, which says something like click me. Now, I could have any amount of pixel padding here, which is like, if I say display inline block, I could have any amount of pixel padding, for example, padding 5 pixel, right? I could have any amount of margin 2 pixel or 20 pixel. I could have any sort of color in the whole spectrum of colors of RGB and web supported colors, which is, to be honest, a huge choice to pick from. I could have any text color. Now, in theory, this sounds awesome and this sounds wonderful, but in practice, when you're doing styling like this, it becomes very, very tiresome to actually build a UI system yourself where the margins are pretty much standardized, the paddings are standardized, the colors are standardized, the color palette is there, and so on. So more than anything, Tailwind does two things for me, which I personally like a lot about. And if you go to the source code program, you would pretty much see Tailwind being used all the way. This page is not rendered on server side, but if you go to a page like this, you can see on program we pretty much use Tailwind in a lot of places. Flex PX2, you can see it's Tailwind all the way. Right. So one of the things which I like a lot about Tailwind are these two things, the most important things. First is that you can cut this UI and paste it in some other project which is also using Tailwind or some other page which has Tailwind enabled, and you don't have to like include style sheets and everything over there because this is like a complete widget in itself. And second of all, it binds you in certain best practices with CSS itself. That is, what should your margin values ideally be? What are your colors which you should be using in your project or which you should be using in your site, and so on. So these abstractions and these value binding plus the ability to get out of these bindings, that is also Tailwind provides. That's fine. This is super important stuff and super awesome of Tailwind as a framework because I'm not a UI person. I don't like to work with UIs as a developer. I can rely on Tailwind's measurements and units and ability to create nice UIs. So this is why I believe Tailwind is an important library for you to learn only if you like it, because it will boost your productivity a lot. That is all for this video. In the next one, in the next interactive videos and labs which we have in this course, we're going to be discussing a lot of new features of Tailwind B, as well as the fundamentals and core understanding of Tailwind as well. Let's just discuss all of that in the next one.
तो ये तो हमें पता ही था क्या है, ठीक है। चलो हैं आगे चले फर्स्ट क्या हो गया ये कॉन्सेप्ट होना ये कहाँ गया है क्वेश्चन होगा तो यार क्या रखते हैं
Hey everyone, welcome to the very first video, very first Tailwind as well. Let's just discuss all of that in the next one.
तो भाई सारे
Hey everyone, welcome to the very first video, very first section, understanding of Tailwind as well. Let's just discuss all of that in the next one.
तो आगे भी तो चलना है यार मेमोरी भैया क्या चाहते हो चलो यहाँ पे कुछ करना है मेरे पास Tailwind CSS is the only framework that I have seen scale and large teams. It's easy to customize the apps to any design and the full size standard. Utility classes help you work within the constraint of the framework style sheets without intro users. They make it easy. अच्छा ये सारा कुछ हो गया कुछ हो गया because Tailwind is so reliable. It never encourages you to design the same site twice. Even with the same color palette and size and scale, it's easy to build the same component with the master projects. चलिए क्विज भी आ गया Tailwind CSS is a programming and CSS framework. API for your design system, pile of pre-built utility classes, CSS framework. You answer incorrectly. तीनों ही हैं इसके आंसर रीसेट क्विज करो CSS framework भी है pile of pre-built utility classes भी है API for your design system ये है API भी है मेरे ख्याल से तीन ही आंसर हैं इसके API for your design system भी है ये लिख लेते हैं अच्छी बात है ये मेरा Tailwind CSS CSS is a CSS framework API for design system API है ये pile of pre-built utility classes चलिए next go to next
In this video, we'll be discussing about how you can get started with Tailwind CSS, and this course in general would also be divided into two parts. The first part is where we are actually learning about Tailwind in HTML world, and the second part will be where we will look at the Tailwind configuration, and we'll also tap into React in that section or in that particular video. So right now, I'm going to stick with the basic HTML CSS JavaScript playground which we have, just to keep things simple. I'm going to include a Tailwind CSS JIT compiler, which I'll tell you when we work on this. And we're going to be learning all about Tailwind using this interface, right? And then further down the line in the course, we'll actually see how to use Tailwind properly with React, because React is the technology which we are learning inside of this full stack or front end or whatever learning path you are enrolled right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at how the new Tailwind CSS you can use in your basic HTML project. So in order to do that, what you have to do is we'll do when we are working with React. But for now, we're going to be going all the way down, and I'm going to be going to this place CDN link. I'm going to be adding this script tag called this script src cdn.tailwindcss.com, right? I'm just going to make some space over here and also remove the style sheet because we're not going to need that. And let's just get rid of these few meta tags as well, because we're not like shipping or anything. So there we are. Now Tailwind is pretty much available to us right away. What this script tag does is, if you open this, you're going to see that it redirects you to cdn.tailwindcss.com/version3. Now, you might be thinking that if Tailwind comes with all the pre-built classes and the things which I mentioned, all the restrictions, then why is it loading a JavaScript bundle instead?
यार नेट को आज पता नहीं क्या हो गया, आज हम ज़्यादा स्पीड चाह रहे हैं और ये नेट हमको तंग कर रहा है। स्क्रिप्ट टैग को वहाँ से कॉपी करके प्लेस मीडियम से ला के
CSS. Well, up till Tailwind 2, there was nothing known as JIT compiler. And what a JIT compiler is, it stands for just in time compiler. This just in time means that Tailwind is actually generating your styles just in time. That means as you're writing it, Tailwind is generating those styles in memory. Now, this is important because with CSS, obviously, even if you restrict it, even if I restricted 10 margin classes, let's say if I have margin 1 to margin 10, right? And then if I have something like padding 1 to padding 10. So you can see over right here, I have padding at x-axis, padding at y-axis. I would have padding at, maybe both axes and so on. So this would pretty much start to get a lot heavy very soon. And this is one of the problems which Tailwind 2 faced as well, which led to the just-in-time compiler mode. That is, the bundle size of Tailwind in the developer environment was so huge, was probably megabytes, that it was no longer a viable option to just keep on loading the whole bundle, whole CSS bundle every single time. In some cases, it was also approaching the browser limits of how much CSS the browser can handle. So something else needed to be done. So what the smart people at Tailwind did is they come up with a just-in-time compiler, which pretty much allows you to write all the CSS which you want of Tailwind, but it will parse that on the runtime, and it will just create styles for those particular classes which you are using instead of just loading all the bundle. So this is why this is a script tag and not a JS and not a CSS bundle. Okay, so how do we verify if this is working or not? So let's verify it with a very simple, let's say h1 tag. I'm going to say my name is Mehul and you are watching this on Code, or rather I should say watching plus practicing, right? Because why. So if I go ahead and give it a class of bg gray 800, you're going to see something nice happen. Automatically, the background is very dark and it is a shade of a gray, but the text is not visible. So I'm going to give it a text of white as well. So you see, it's almost like intuitive. If you read it, it says like background gray of 800. 800 is the intensity of the color. So if you can guess, less intense color would probably be like something like 400 or 300. What you have to realize is that when we talk about intensity of the stuff in Tailwind, it's always in the multiple of 100, except for 50. So there is a shade available of BG Gray 50, which is a very, very light gray. I'm not even sure if that is visible in the video, but if it is, I'm saying the truth. There is a color of BG Gray 50. There will not be a color of BG Gray 49 or anything. This will just probably not render anything at all because it's just CSS not found. But 50 is there, 100 is there, then 200 is there, 300 is there, and so on. So as you move above, this color gets a bit stronger and stronger, right? So it just keeps getting stronger at a point, because you have text white over here, it's advisable to give it something like 700 or 800, right? So these are the classes, and the good thing about this is if I give it a padding of, let's say, 2, I'm going to come to these units as well, the margin of, let's say, 4. Now the block which we have created over here, and let's say if I also give it a shadow, bear with me over here, it will just become a little bit easier in more time. Now, the good thing about this h1 tag, or nice thing about this h1 tag, is that this tag would always render this particular layout, and all I have to do is cut and paste this in any place, in any environment where Tailwind is running, right? So this is the awesome thing about Tailwind, that you pretty much have, an independence from importing all the CSS styles and stuff like that. So this is
ये अच्छा वैसे पॉइंट बताया, ये हैरी भाई ने नहीं बताया था कि हम इसमें जो भी यानी कि एक अगर ब्लॉग बना लेते हैं तो हम उस ब्लॉग को वैसे का वैसा उठा के कहीं और भी रख सकते हैं जहाँ पे टेलविंड इस्तेमाल हो रही है, उसको दोबारा से हमें CSS इंपोर्ट नहीं करना पड़ेगा एंड ऑल दैट, वो सारा कुछ स्टफ नहीं करना पड़ेगा। तो ये लिख लेते हैं। एडवांटेज ऑफ टेलविंड, जब भी हम एक ब्लॉग या फिर कंपोनेंट बनाते हैं उसको हम एज इट इज कॉपी करके दूसरी किसी भी वेबसाइट में भी यूज़ कर सकते हैं। इसके लिए हमें बार-बार पूरा CSS नंबर को मूव नहीं करना पड़ेगा। बिग एडवांटेज।
One an independence from pretty much have an independence from importing all the CSS styles and stuff like that. So this is one of the aspects which I like a lot. So yep, let's keep this video to this because we have done enough. We have imported Tailwind state compiler. We have understood why JIT is needed. We have done a bit of Hello World kind of stuff with Tailwind as well, and we have done the Hello World thing. So yeah, that's the most important part of starting something new. So that is all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video, or rather, I should say next course item because these are not just videos anymore. Really soon.
क्या करना है? In this course, data you will learn about how to perform hello with Tailwind CSS as your framework. स्क्रिप्ट का टैग ऊपर ऐड है, तो हमने क्या करना है, चेंज द क्लास फ्रॉम BG ग्रे 700 टू BG ग्रे 800। बस एक ही टास्क करना है, BG ग्रे 800। वैसे ये आप बहुत ईजी है, सिंपल P दे दो, सिंपल फॉर मार्जिन दे दो, पैडिंग दे दो, शैडो दे दो, फिर उसने बॉक्स बना दिया यहाँ पर। नाइस। टेस्ट केस पास लोड समान change the class from BG grey 700 to BG yellow। ओहो, पूरा भी लफ्ज़ पढ़ लिया मेरे को। BG yellow, BG yellow दे दिया। BG yellow 800 टेस्ट वाइट है, शैडो भी है उसका, रन टेस्ट करके देखो। हो गया बॉस, कंटिन्यू नेक्स्ट आइटम। अच्छा, इसमें अब हम EX पिक्सल नहीं अब इस्तेमाल करते, इसमें हमने अब रेंज इस्तेमाल करना है। इनमें तो CSS ही करती है, हम तो नहीं करते, टेलविंड खुद ही करेगी इसको।
Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, let's just go ahead and try to understand what exactly is this to and fro and all the stuff which is going on. I'm gonna head back to the Tailwind documentation, and this is like one place where you should be spending not just in Tailwind, rather I think pretty much anything with like really like Tailwind, which has
यार नट नहीं करो यार, क्या कर रहे हो?
a very nice interface and a lot of things on it. It's always a good idea. But anyway, if we go to something like let's search for padding over here, you're gonna see we have all these units over here. Now you can see that Tailwind does not have a continuous limit, a continuous unit as in you can create 0.75 RAM in Tailwind utility, but you cannot create a 0.76 RAM, right? So when I say that Tailwind restricts you in a way where it will not give you pretty much all the things to do, this is what I mean, right? You cannot just blow up your design by having a left and right with a padding of 0.75 and then top and bottom of a weird 0.76 or something like that, which does not seem to. But you can see all of these units, these are like class names on the left. All of these class names actually have a corresponding RAM unit, not a pixel. There were a couple of pixel units at the top if you took a look. That is padding right pixel, padding top pixel, padding y pixel, and so on. But all the other things are not in pixel. Similarly, for margin, you will find similar units and the other utilities which involve any sort of padding or margin or any sort of unit. You're going to see that they do not include pixel. Instead, they include the name. Now, there's an important reason for that. Let's say if I start with this example, let's say, if I tell you to read this example, how would you read it? Background of gray, text of white. This means starting to pretty much everywhere on the side. Let's say if I wanted to have a padding of 10 only on the x-axis, nothing on the y-axis, you can see it reflects. And then on the y-axis, let's say if I wanted to have a 24, which is like a huge padding, but sometimes you will see that 25 will not work, right? Why? Because 25 is not a class. So for that, you would have to check either in the documentation or if you're working locally on VS Code, your IDE should also give you hints. We are in the process of adding the auto completion and IDE part Tailwind in the playground. So if for some reason you think that the style is not working, make sure to double check whether that style even exists in Tailwind or not. You can see over here, after 24, you can see there's a direct jump to 28, right? So the values are also continuous initially, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they also have gaps, right? So this is something you have to remember when you're using Tailwind. That sometimes if the class is not reflecting, it is possible that you have written the wrong style. So I'm going to go back to 24, and you can see we have a nice little thing. And this margin over here also follows the similar format of margin X and then margin Y of, let's say, 10. And you can see it gives me 10 units of margin on the Y part and 4 units of margin on the X part. That is the X axis. Or if I have a similar value, I can just drop this entire and actually use this. All right, that is fine. But the question still remains, why do we have REMs in Tailwind and not Pixel? Now, the reason for this is because REMs are more customizable than Pixel. One REM, essentially one unit over here, if this is 1, then that is 16 pixels by default in pretty much every screen. So you see, when you have a padding of 1 REM, you actually are doing 16 pixels of padding. So if I go ahead and actually take a look at this H1 over here, and if I shift to compute it, which actually shows us what the real CSS is being applied, real CSS, right? Not the fancy stuff which they use to it. This is the real CSS which is being applied to real time. You can see we gave it a padding X of 10, which means padding left and right of 10 units. 10 units, according to the documentation over here, means that the padding is 2.5 frames, and 2.5 frames should technically be equal to 40 pixels of padding. If I go back, if I check out padding left and right, you can see it's 40 pixels. It's in the computer tab. That means this is what is being applied. Now here's the fun part with REMs. The fun part is if I go to the HTML tag at top and if I change the font size of HTML tag from 16 pixel to let's say 18 pixel, you can see every single thing on the page which was using a REM automatically got adjusted. If I go back to this computer, you can see the padding left and right became 14 pixel. Why? Because the calculation now is not happening on 16, it's happening on 80, which is the base size of the page. Now let me tell you that most systems always have 16 pixels as the default value, so you don't have to worry about it. But you remember, or if you have ever seen that you can go to the browser settings and toggle that area where it says I'm not able to read font at 16 pixels, so let me just increase it a little bit. So you have those sliders for people who want to see things a little bit bigger on their phones or on their screens. That is where the browser would start injecting this particular thing. And this is, if for example somebody wants to have a 24 pixel kind of thing, it will automatically adjust according to their preference in their whatever setting they have chosen. Again, let me remind you that like probably 95% of the world does not keep it at 24. They will keep it at 16 only. But for some people who want to do that, still your website would look possible. On the other hand, if you were using pixels, then padding or not font size actually, if you are using padding left and right of 16 and padding right of 16 as well, this would actually not reflect properly, right? This will actually break in a way where it'll I think in this case it would not really matter as much because H1 is a block unit, but still in case of margin you will see the difference. If I change this margin left and right values, you will see that the margin padding everything would be the same and your site will not scale properly. So this is why Tailwind uses REM as a choice, and this is why you don't really have to worry about REM and pixel. And to be honest, I did this video. I wanted to convey this concept because sometimes you might confuse what is the significance of this unit and everything. So the significance of this unit in itself is that 4 of these units is actually 1 REM, right? So it's 4 is 1 REM. So it's basically like saying every 1 increment is an increase of 0.25 REM, which in itself is something like 0.25 times 16, which is 4 pixels, right? So kind of, you want to think about this in an intuitive way. When you go from 1 to 2, you're actually increasing 4 pixels, then 3, 4 pixels, then 4, 4 pixels, and so on, right? If you wanted to think about that way. Yep, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you were able to get a nice idea about how and why you will use ends and not pixels. And yep, that's all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next one really soon.
Change HTML font size to 24 pixels and make the change. Change the HTML. Font किया था इसमें font size mention style now the time style is equal to font size करना font size to से हम लिखेंगे 24 पिक्सल font size बड़ा होया कि नहीं होया नहीं होया font size और वही मैंने क्या किया इसी को लिख दिया यहाँ पे हमारे भी नहीं बड़ा गया क्या है इसको font size ये ऐसे लिखा है मैंने font size 24 पिक्सल font size 25 पिक्सल से स्टाइल को रेस कर देंगे जैसे font size nine size 24 पिक्सल अच्छा जी font size 24 कितने लोग हमें तो ये भी नहीं लिखने आते लेकिन हमने HTML को छेड़ना ही नहीं है स्टाइल के टैग के जो है वही हम उसी के साथ खुश हैं भाई साहब हम टेस्ट कर हम डेली में यूज इसलिए कर रहे हैं कि नए बंदे पढ़ेंगे
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm in this video. Before we get into all the Tailwind CSS, styling and shadows and this and that, what I want to discuss about is the fundamental way Tailwind works with responsive design and with devices of different widths, and that is using these classes. Now, in Tailwind, what you have to understand is that a lot of metadata to the existing classes is attached using column, right? So let's take a look at these set of classes. This set of class say that SM, MD, large, extra large, and extra large have these particular take points as the a minimum width, which is important. And what this means is that if I am in this particular class, and if I say that, hey, this SM should be BG grade 700, which means anything above 640 pixel should have this style guide, right? If the screen size is above 640 pixels, then only the style should be applied. And this could be visually seen as I drag this. If I make this above 640, you can see the moment my screen goes above 640 pixel, we get the gray, and the moment it goes down 640 pixel, we pretty much lose the gray because it is lost, right? I mean, this becomes white. If I give this a background of, let's say, BG yellow 900, like this, you can see this is yellow right now, as long as it is under 640 pixel width. And the moment I cross that, you can see it becomes green. Now this is like a media query, and this is in fact a media query under the hood. It says that anything which is minimum width of 640 should have this particular style, right? And in this case, it doesn't matter the order in which you put. You can put it above as well because media queries have a higher specificity than a single style. So you can see this would still work. But this is important because using these selectors, using these SM, MD, LG, XL to XL, you can customize the behavior of the website, right? So you don't have to write explicit media in CSS. You can just write it, write the behavior over here, and be done with it. For example, one quick example I can also show you is something like SM, and then you can say text to XL, right? So you can see that if I increase the size of this div, the text automatically increases because the X is set to XL. If it goes to 4XL, for example, you're going to see it becomes much larger the moment you cross that small bound, right? So you can see you can play around with a lot of styles in Tailwind using these settings. And the good thing about them is that there is no limit pretty much to whatever you make them. So, for example, if you enter a background as a normal class, you can also enter that as a background SL or MD or XL or extra large or anything, right? So you can pretty much apply all the styles, whatever you want, with these responsive selectors as well, and that'll just work out of the box. And this is like most common with layouts and sometimes with font sizes as well, and with paddings as well. A lot of times, less common with colors and stuff because ideally you not switch colors based on the layout. But yeah, I mean that's something you can do. So that's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one really soon.
On hitting SM1, the text of H1 tag should be white and the background should be gray 700. On hitting MD, we work the H1 tag should have background of pink 800, VG pink 800, VG gray 700. अच्छा ये हमारे क्लास इस पर हम लोग आ जाएंगे जैसे ही एग्जाम को हिट करें इजी ग्रे 700 जैसे ही एम डी को हिट करें तो ये हो जाएगा बीजी इंक बीजी इंक 200 या बीजी इंक 800 कार को अलग नहीं चाहिए इस पेन चला दिया और अच्छा ये जैसे ही छोटे नंबर में रहेगा समान निकल रहा है स्मॉल हिट करे तो वही स्मॉल पे जब स्मॉल जा रही है तो फिर वो होनी चाहिए ना एम डी का क्यों लगा हुआ मीडियम तो मीडियम मीडियम 748 पे रिजल्ट भी होता है और स्मॉल 640 पे होता है अच्छा बड़े से आता है ना सही तो जैसे ही बड़े से आएगा ये मीडियम की तरफ ये हिट किया और मीडियम की तरफ छोटे की तरफ जाएगा तो उसको हिट करना तो चाहिए आगे पीछे करके देखते हैं इसको कुछ फर्क पड़ता है खींचाएँ अच्छा एक आप जैसे छोटे को हिट कर रहा तो वो ये हो रहा उसकी वजह से मीडियम को हिट करे तो मीडियम पहले ही आएगा मेरे पास सही पकड़े हो पांडे जी नहीं सही नहीं पकड़े तो ये क्या बात हुई यार मीडियम से ज़्यादा पिल सही तो स्क्रीन जैसे समझ लगता है स्क्रीन कितना काम कर रहे हैं इसको करना चाहिए इसको ब्राउज़र में खोल के देखते हैं फिर सही पता लगेगा हाँ मुझे पता, देख लिया आपने पॉन्ड है, इसको खरीदना है हमने, इसके ज़रिए अमीर नहीं होना हमने। अच्छा प्रोजेक्ट है ये, देख लो 402 नंबर पे है। मार्शलैंड पॉन्ड, याद रखना आज की डेट 24/4/2022। अगर कोई क्रिप्टो स्पेस में आया ना तो ले ले, तो ऑस्ट्रेलियन सप्लाई है इसकी, अभी तक हाफ जो है बाहर है, सर्कुलेटिंग जो 3 है 3.9। मार्केट कैप अभी तक 107 मिलियन का है, 107 मिलियन का है, और ये 10 बिलियन है, बिलियन बोल दिया उसको। अब ये देखना 27 0.27 सेंट। अब ये आएगा ज़ीरो, इधर आ जाएगा 0.27। ओ दुनिया अमीर, बंद हो जाए, तुम काम करने दो हमें, वर्गलाओ मत। ओके, देख लेते हैं भाई क्या करता है, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा फेल कर देगा हमको। नो टेस्ट केस पास, देखा ना, सीन है। On hitting SM viewport, the text of H1 tag should be white। अच्छा, टेक्स्ट भी तो वाइट करना है, ये इसीलिए नहीं हिट हुआ मेरे ख्याल से। इसका टेक्स्ट वाइट ऐसे लिख देते हैं, टेक्स्ट वाइट, टेक्स्ट वाइट। अभी पता नहीं था, मुझे नहीं समझ आई, तो मैंने एकदम मीडियम पर लगाया, तो ये ऊपर लगना चाहिए था, ये नीचे में लग रहा है। सोचने दो ये नीचे से ऊपर की तरफ लगता है, नीचे से ऊपर की तरफ लगता है, मतलब स्मॉल लगेगा, उससे ऊपर ऊपर कंटिन्यू हो जाएगा, उसके नीचे नीचे ऐसे करेंगे। देखते हैं हम, टेस्ट करते हैं, याद भूल गया, इसको चेंज कर देंगे, ऐसा कर लेते हैं। स्मॉल पहले लिख लो, रेट कर लो, नंबर भी कर लो। ये तो आगे देखना पड़ना है क्या कह रहा है ये। हमने इसी को देखो कर दिया, इसलिए ये जानिए देगा फिर इसकी पहले वही लगा दी है। सॉरी ज़्यादा बढ़िया जी, 200 पिक्सल, पिक्सल में पैडिंग एक्सेल, पैडिंग वाई। अब मेमोरी पे ये करना है, एक्सेल। अब ये देखेंगे कि ये जो है ना, ये उस पर नीचे लगेगी, सबसे नीचे ये लगेगी, फिर जैसे स्मॉल पे आएगा फिर ये लगेगी, मीडियम पे आएगा ये लगेगी, देखते हैं। यही बंद होना है। बैकग्राउंड मुझे 200 कब लग रहा है, वो तो लग ही नहीं रहा। टेक्स्ट वाइट इधर आ गया, टेक्स्ट वाइट हो गई, ऐसे ब्लैक ही रहे। उसके अंदर लिखा है, सारों पे टेक्स्ट लगा दिया उसने, फिर जिसके ऊपर हिट करना है ना उसके अंदर ही लगाना है। स्पेस देंगे ना तो वो छोड़ेगा उसको। रन टेस्ट करके देखते हैं पास हुआ कि नहीं। कोड कंपाइल्ड एंड रन सक्सेसफुली। H1 tag should have pink 800 नहीं है, बैकग्राउंड ऑफ pink 800। क्या कर रहे हो? फिर इसको कलर इस तरह का करना होगा। इसके अप्लाई नहीं है। चले यहाँ तक आ गई है। खुलवाने वाली है भाई। जैसे स्मॉल का हिट करेगा तो ग्रे हो जाएगा, जैसे स्मॉल से बढ़ जाएगा तो ग्रे भी नहीं होगा। भगवान साहब बंदे यही तो कर रहा हूँ और क्या कर रहा हूँ। अभी तो तुमने किया ऐसे ऐसे तो भाई क्या मुझे लगता है स्पेस की वजह से कुछ नहीं पकड़ ही ना स्पेस स्पेस सेट। अब जैसे ही हमें क्या वो स्मॉल पर हिट करेगा, स्मॉल से नीचे रहेगा तो जो मैंने छोटी लगा दी वो स्मॉल पे स्मॉल से ऊपर आएगा तो ये नाइस यार। अब समझ आई है। वो एमडी का वो पिंक तो लग ही नहीं रहा था, वो तो अपनी मर्जी से वो सारों को कर जा रहा था बाय डिफॉल्ट ही। बैकग्राउंड पिंक रखा हुआ था ना मैंने, वो एमडी को नहीं लग रहा था। हाँ हाँ स्पेस नहीं देनी इसमें भाई साहब। हाँ स्पेस भी लिख देते हैं यहाँ पे स्पेस। नीचे से ऊपर की तरफ लगता है ना, स्मॉल जैसे हिट होगा तो ये रहेगा, नीचे से ऊपर जाता है और मीडियम हिट होगा तो उससे ऊपर ऊपर यही रहेगा। अगर इससे नीचे कुछ लिखेंगे तो उससे बड़े पे जा ऊपर इस तरह अलग दिखता भाई। और हाँ ये करने से पता लगता है जी भैया पे, तो हमने वैसे भी जवाब दिया था तो हमें पता नहीं था लग रहा इन चीज़ों का। थैंक यू हैरी और नकुल भैया, एक पाकिस्तानी मेहनत कर रहे हैं इंडियंस कंटेंट पे। नाइस। अगर कभी हम कामयाब हुए तो हम भी कंटेंट बनाएंगे, लेकिन नो ऑफेंस यार, इंडियन भैया जी वाकई उनसे बहुत आगे आईटी में और वो ये साबित भी कर रहे हैं। आए ओए। My name is Mehul and you are watching Plus Practicing this. सुनो यार। चलो भाइयों
Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take out some time to discuss about all the colors which are available in Tailwind and how you can set them as background or text colors. Right, so I'm going to get rid of the responsive styles for now so that we can focus more on the colors part. So if I go ahead and take a look at this colors section in the, let's see, there should be a dedicated section for colors. I think inside theme, inside colors. There we go. So you can see that Tailwind by default, and because we are using JIT, we get this complete color palette right out of the box, right? So you can see we have slate color, we have gray, same, neutral, all these colors, and we have, like I mentioned earlier in the, I think in the introduction video, we have very light shade in terms of 50. Then after that, it just increments from 100 in terms of 100, right? 100, 200, 300, all the way up to 900. So one of the best things about Tailwind is that it also gives you a nice color palette, which are carefully chosen colors with nice, color theme and nice background contrast with the text colors as well. Obviously, you can add some colors. We'll get a lot about Tailwind configuration later down the line. But for now, the way this works is that you pick up whatever color you want. For example, in this case, let's pick up this keyword, which I don't know how to pronounce, but it looks awesome. So I'm going to paste this over here, lowercase. I'm going to add an intensity of a particular color. Right? In this case, I just chose 900. You could have pretty much chosen 800, 700 if you work out of the box. Similarly, for text, you can see that white works out of the box because Tailwind just provides that, although you can see that white isn't like really written anywhere, but that still works. But in general, you can play with the gray or the slate variants as well. Text gray wouldn't work. What you have to do is text gray and then an intensity of that as well. So in this case, this is just a little bit gray, so that's why it appears almost like white. This is like even more true than white. But this over here is pretty much a solid dark gray. Right, so you can play with these colors in terms of background and text colors. You can also give background gradients as a color, which is like a really cool and awesome thing you can do with Tailwind. Although I would admit it's not like completely customizable and controllable. If you want anything which is more customizable, you will have to go into CSS files. But here's how the background gradient part works. So for the gradient color, what you can do is say BG gradient to right, which means it should start the gradient from left and to right, and that is also clear in what we're about to write. And then you have to say from the color and the intensity, whatever that color is. So you can see that already the gradient is working just fine. It fades into the transparent color, but that's usually not what you want. If you are creating a gradient, it should probably go all the way. So it is something like 2 blue 600, right? So blue and cyan is basically a little bit on the similar side, so it forms a nice gradient over here. Similarly, you can have gradients not only just between different colors, but between same colors as well. So if you do something like this also creates a gradient in terms of just increasing the intensity. So that's also awesome. And what you can do,
ये मजे का फीचर है किधर है बैकग्राउंड वाला हमारा उसके अंदर इसको लिखते हैं फॉन्ट साइज ओवर फोकस लाइट ग्रेडियंट कलर भी यहाँ देते हैं ग्रेडियंट ग्रेडियंट अच्छा इसको पोर्टफोलियो में भी यूज़ करेंगे can use gradient colors with Tailwind CSS. Yes. Easy gradient. इसको लिखना to right. मतलब right से start और कहा है from cyan 600 अच्छा बता रहे हैं कि from cyan 600 to cyan 700 आपस में कलर मिक्स भी कर सकते हैं एक कलर में भी रह सकते हैं कलर को मिक्स भी कर सकते हैं और एक कलर में भी रह सकते हैं
I mean, this is pretty much all you can get in terms of the gradient stops. This is like a 50% kind of 50% in between transition. You can also specify via and then cyan, let's say 400. So what you have the option over here in terms of customizing gradient is specifying either 2 stops or 3 stops and the colors, which is from the Tailwind color palette, right? So this is pretty much it in terms of what you can achieve with gradients, which is also pretty awesome, right? If you just want to create a nice looking gradient. In fact, if you go to Codam's website, you're going to see at homepage this gradient. This is actually a gradient which you have in the back, right? This particular thing. So yep, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you will be able to get a little bit more information about how to work with colors, how to work with gradients, how to work with background and text colors in this one. That is all for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one very soon.
तीन कलर की नाइस यार, ये बड़ा अच्छा पिक्चर है।
Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's
सिंपल
just go
सी
ahead
है,
and
इसमें
take
तो
out
हम
some time
कर
to
देंगे,
discuss
करते
about all the colors with a
कर तो लिया है, अभी क्या करना चाहते हो?
bit more information about how to work with colors, how to work with gradients, how to work with background and text colors in this one. That is all for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one very soon.
चलो तुम जाओ इधर, इधर आओ, तुम नीचे क्या करना है अभी? The H1 element should have a gradient background to right. अच्छा जी. The start color of the gradient should be green of 400 shade and the end color should be the blue of 500 shade. Okay. तो gradient करना है. तो करेंगे, क्या करेंगे? Should have to right. तो सबसे पहले तो हम इसको रेड कर देंगे, बैकग्राउंड कर देंगे हम ग्रेडियंट टू आर राइट करना है और फ्रॉम करना है ग्रीन, फ्रॉम ग्रीन 400 टू 500. नहीं हुआ जी, ये क्या पीजी ग्रेडियंट, ग्रेडियंट की स्पेलिंग GRADIENT, ग्रेडियंट टू आर फ्रॉम. अच्छा ये इधर ये क्या कर दिया है, यहाँ पे भी दो डैशेज आनी है बस. ये अच्छा फायदा सामने है. नाइस नाइस नाइस. ये अच्छा फीचर है, ये हम अपने नए वर्क में भी यूज़ करेंगे पोर्टफोलियो के अंदर. फीचर चलो भाई, भैया जी भैया जी जी कौन है भाई, काहे डरा रहे हो? This is going to be over classes भी अच्छी हैं, काम करो तो क्या हो, ना हो तो क्या ना हो.
Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's look at hover classes in Tailwind as well, because hover is also one of a common action, especially on desktops where you have a mouse pointer. So Tailwind makes it easier to customize your styles based on hovering as well. So instead of writing CSS for this, we have inbuilt support for Tailwind, and just like you would do it with a responsive breakdown, you would do the similar thing in Tailwind with a hover and then a column. And then whatever style you write over here would reflect whenever you are hovering. So if I have text gray 900 and a PG hover, remember that you have to write forward multiple times, BG gray 200. If I do something like this, and when I hover over this, you can see the text turns gray, but the background does not turn gray because you can see we have a gradient. So that might be taking a bit of more specificity. So I can probably give it BGCR, like something like that. So now if I hover over this, you can see text turns black and the background turns gray, right? So this is how you will work with hover in general. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. You just specify the styles which you want, and they will start working the moment you pretty much hover on any color element. So yep, that's pretty much it for this video. A quick one, a short one, but make sure you practice that out in the playground and proceed forward. That is all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video really soon.
Nice. So on hovering on H1 should change the background color to yellow shade for so should change the text color to black. अच्छा text white background इसका नाम करना ये जो है text ahista siamo होते जा रहे हो फ्लैक्स बॉक्स भी आ गया ये आती भाई देखो कितना कंटेंट हो गया ये तो मुका देंगे भाई चलो हमारे पास एक कोर्स भी आ जाएगा पहली भैया ने तो हमें कोर्स में कोई सर्टिफिकेट देना नहीं है यहाँ से सर्टिफिकेट तो आ ही जाएगा मुका देना आज मैंने इंशाल्लाह तो
Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, we'll be discussing about how to build Flexbox layouts in Tailwind. And this goes without saying that we will not be discussing Flexbox in general, but only about using Flexbox because we have already done that in the CSS course. So if you're not following the full stack or the front end learning part of the program, it is high time that you do because that is a part, that is a structure in which you will be following, or becoming a full stack or front end developer. But anyway, let's start with the Flexbox in CSS. And just like other classes, it's pretty simple to use Flexbox with Tailwind because they provide out-of-the-box classes and out-of-the-box utilities for most common things. Let's just go ahead and start developing a very simple layout. Let's say something like, let's say this is a div, and I have another 3 divs inside this, right? What I can do is at the same time, I can give them all a width, or let's say a height of 10, something like that, the background color of gray, 800, this would be blue, this would be red, something like that, right? And on the top, I could start giving this some flex input, right? So right away, you can see that the moment I give it flex, everything just disappears because these do not have bits with them. Now with flex, what happens is that if I go ahead and refresh this, if I go ahead and open this, you're going to see that this flex class actually just says display flex and nothing more. So what we want is that every single one of them to be equal with by saying flex1. Now what does this mean in real world CSS? Is if you go ahead and take a look at flex1, it gives you a flex growth, flex string, and flex basis of 0. So just a quick revision with Flexbox, flex growth 1 and flex shrink 1 means that you should try to take as much space as you can. And flex basis is basically a kind of like a width equivalent in Flexbox, and giving it a 0% just means that you fall back to flex grow and shrink. So this gives you a nice little layout. You can see I can also go ahead and increase this, let's say a little bit, or if this is available. Yep, or maybe we can use the highest one, which I think is 96. And you can see now that we have a nice little layout. Now, a nice thing which we can do is combine this with a responsive base layout. I can say that, hey, whenever this is by default, this is flex column, but no, not flex column, actually flex row. That is the default flex behavior. But whenever I am on a larger screen, for anything which is smaller, it should be flex column. And in this case, you can see because we don't have a definitive width, I can also go ahead and do something like on SM, this is flex 1, but otherwise it just takes the full width as well. All right, so what's happening over here? You can see the moment I cross that small barrier, the moment I cross that, all of them get this class removed, or not exactly removed, but the effect of this class gone. So this is why you get a flex call. I mean, this is basically in a stack, vertical stack. The moment we go over this class takes over, and then this renders in a row, right? So if you know how flexbox operates, you know this would be useful for triggering mobile-based layouts, right? Wherever size goes below 640 pixels. So yep, this is like pretty much how you can work with flexbox. There are a bunch of utilities: flex none, flex auto, flex one, or forward. You can also kind of like modify the style and the bit of functionality. But for this part, you probably would see yourself working with this flex property, flex call, flex row property, and the modifiers associated with them. Flex one, something like you can also do something like if we go to this area and get rid of this, then I can say something like flex grow. Then I can say to this, for example, something like width 24. Then this could be width 24 as well, right? So now you can see that this one takes all the available width, and these ones are 24 units of width in this case, right? So you can play around with this, and it's easy to build such layouts. You can see this works just fine. But yeah, that's pretty much it. How you can get started with Flexbox and with Flex in general with Tailwind. All you have to do is understand which class is doing what sort of trigger. So Flex triggers display Flex. Flex calls trigger the direction. Then with responsiveness combined, you can change the direction. You can Flex grow, Flex shrink, Flex one. All sorts of things can help you there inside that. The moment I give it flex, everything just disappears to be equal with by saying flex one. Now, what does this mean? Is if you go ahead and maybe fall back, I can also go ahead and increase this, let's say a little bit, I think it's 96, to in order to combine this with a responsive base layout in the flex column, but nope, not flex column, actually flex row. That is the default flex behavior. But whenever I am on a larger screen, for anything which is smaller, it should be flex column. And in this case, you can see because we don't have a definitive width, I can also go ahead and flex one happening over here. The moment I cross the effect of last box, basically know how to flex. Yep, that's pretty much it for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one really soon.
Okay, it should have the flex class. Okay, all the flex items should have flex grow and flex ring set tone so that they take equal width of the view spot. यहाँ पे हम लिख देंगे flex करना क्या है सारी क्लासेस को यहाँ पे दे देना है यहाँ पे और यहाँ पे स्पेस लेंगे यहाँ पे लिखेंगे फ्लैक्स वन फ्लैक्स वन लिखेंगे तो वन की रेशो में ग्रो कर देंगे सारी अब इनका फ्लैक्स ग्रो श्रिंक जो है ना यानी कि ग्रो होने का भी और श्रिंक होने का भी एक जैसे पड़ेगा देखिए बराबर बराबर रहेगा अगर किसी को ये नहीं समझ लग रही तो यहाँ पे मैं ना टू करता हूँ देखना भी क्या होगा तो पहले वाला ना वो डबल हो जाएगा अब अगर मैं छोटा करूँगा तो मुझसे डबल में कम होगा और अगर मैं बड़ा करूँगा तो वो डबल में कम होगा वन वन उनको दी हुई है ना इसको भी टू करके देखेंगे पहले वाला वन पे आ जाएगा और वो टू टू पे आ जाएंगे तो क्या आधा आ जाएगा और उसी तरह ग्रो भी करेगा श्रिंक भी करेगा तो इसलिए हम इसको
Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's go ahead and take a look at grid as well, with Tailwind, how you can work with grids. And grid is also a great way to build UIs, especially two-dimensional UIs, where you want a lot of customization and control over a grid sort of formation instead of just a flexbox, which allows you to either work horizontally or vertically. So in this case, we're going to start off with a very simple example where we can probably create something like this only. We're going to start off with the same thing, but let's say we give this each of them a dimension of 20 maybe as well. Get rid of flex growth thing. So we can go ahead and do something like this. And over here, instead of flex, I'm going to change this to grid. This allows us to use all the properties which we have, right? So in this case, you can see we can use grid columns 4, which means that this should be organized in columns of 4. So if we have a bunch of more such elements, right, you can say grid columns 4 or 3. In this case, you can see they equally line up in 3 different grids, right? We'll just probably say this as W full instead of restricting the width. And you can see that it converts. Of course, this is not visible right now, so what we can say is gap of one, which is like a grid property, which allows you to give a little bit of gap between all these elements. Similarly, you can play around with other properties of column start, template start, row start, and row end. So, for example, in case of call start or call span, I can go to a particular grid and give it a property of, let's say, this one right here has call span of 2, and get rid of this one over here. So you can see that the second one now spans 2 columns. So you can play around with more properties of grid by looking at the documentation and whatever your layouts demand you to do. But it's basically CSS, right? You can see the equivalent CSS as well over here. Sometimes the CSS might be a little bit more complex in a way because Tailwind might be using variables and all sorts of stuff in the CSS. But if you understand the premise of what Tailwind is doing, it's easier to build complex layouts over here as well. You see it has pretty much support for all the grid properties, which we have learned in the CSS module in the CSS section. And it also has properties support for flexbox, which we also looked at in a couple of videos before. But I think we skipped over the justify content items and this sort of stuff, which is also like pretty basic and one of the few things we should discuss like almost immediately once we start working with flexbox. So I hope that you remember the justify content and left and right and center and all that stuff from the CSS module. If you do not, then go back into your full stack learning path or front end learning path and take a look. And these properties basically just plug and play and allows you to write those particular styles. Yep, that's pretty much it for grid as well in Tailwind. In the coming videos, when we build some apps or something with the Tailwind CSS, we're going to be using a lot of this stuff. So make sure you keep an eye out on not only just this course, but other courses ahead where we will use Tailwind. So that is all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video.
yes के सेंटर में इवनली का मतलब होता है दोनों तरफ सारों के दरमियान यानी कि इसके राइट भी और लेफ्ट भी सही क्या कहते हैं the main element should become the grid container having the class grid. The grid should be divided to 3 calls. तो यहाँ पे कर देते हैं grid 3 का क्या था grid करके देखते हैं क्या है ग्रेड और आसान है हम खोल लेते हैं टेलविंड की वही मेरे पास भी पड़ी हुई है ऐसी भी कोई बात नहीं है टेलविंड की डॉक्यूमेंटेशन ये पड़ी है ये इसकी डॉक्स पे आ गए डॉक्स पे आ गए यहाँ पे सर्च कर लो ग्रेड हमारा तो ये आएगा ग्रेड ग्रेड रोज ग्रेड स्टार ग्रेड प्रो ग्रेड कॉलम्स में देखते हैं क्या है ऑटो आ गया ग्रेड कॉल 1 ऐसे अच्छा ग्रेड कॉल 3 ये कहाँ पे आएगा ग्रेड ये काम किया grade should be divided into 3 columns. Each grid element should have a horizontal gap of 4 and vertical gap of 5. Horizontal gap. Gap horizontal x के साथ आ जाएगा y के साथ आ जाएगा gap x gap y देख लेते हैं क्या कहता है gap x और horizontal x-axis पे होता है gap y 5 बन गया सेट हो ठीक हो ठीक है और orange span should span the entire row should span the entire row दिख रही इसकी जो है ना स्पैन स्पैन कैसे लिखते हैं स्पैन जो इसमें होगा स्पैनिंग रूल्स रो स्पैन थ्री रो स्पैन टू तीनों रोज एक रो दूसरी को तीसरी रो को स्पैन कर देगा कॉलम दो कॉलम स्पैन के लिए दूसरा और दूसरे कॉलम पे स्पैन कर देगा दो कॉलम एक और दो तीन है मेरे हाथ में टोटल और ग्रिड ग्रिड रोज तीन है ग्रिड फ्लो कॉलम और गैप फोर ये तो मैं इधर से देख लेता है डॉक्यूमेंटेशन इसीलिए समझ आ रही है ये तीसरी थी ना स्पैन है रो स्पैन और कोल स्पैन अब उसने क्या कहा है जी ऑरेंज स्पैन शुड स्पैन द एंटायर रो द ग्रिड तो रो यानी कि एंटायर होनी चाहिए तो रो स्पैन कितनी एक दो तीन तीन है तो तीन लिख लूँगा तो तीसरी तक चली जाएगी क्या है ठीक है क्या क्यों नहीं किया ऑरेंज स्पैन और वो क्लास में आईडी में थोड़ी लिखना है क्लास में लिखना है भाई स्पैन आएगा नहीं गया रो आर डब्ल्यू रो स्पैन थ्री क्या है क्लास में आ गया तो रो स्पैन थ्री और इनसे करता हूँ उसको एक तो तीन से कर लिए तो पहले इसको मैंने इधर को लेके रो ऊपर नीचे होती है ये कॉलम है तो ये फॉल स्पैन आएगा फॉल स्पैन अब ये जाएगा चला गया ना अब इसको वापस ब्लू को रीच कर दो भाई लेंच नाइस स्क्रॉल स्नैपिंग
Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, we're going to look at how to build a Tailwind, which is not exactly a carousel for the build and goals and stuff because we need JS for that, but mostly a nice widget which will snap itself in place the scroll, right? And this is because of the new addition of scroll snapping, right? Not in CSS, the widget which will at how to build a simple sort of carousel. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to build a simple sort of carousel in CSS with Tailwind, which is not exactly a carousel for the build and goals and stuff because we need JS for that. It's mostly a nice widget which will snap itself in place, just like this particular widget does when I release this one, right? And this is a new addition of scroll snapping feature in Tailwind, not in CSS. It has been available for CSS, right? But this scroll snap line, which is possible now inside of Tailwind, is available in version 3. Let's take a look at how we can build this particular app right here. You can see when I leave my mouse, it snaps itself to the center. Not exactly center, to the start, because that's what the snap says. But let's see how we can build it with a couple of tips over here. I'm going to get rid of this. You can see, let's take a look at how we can build this particular app right here. You can see when I leave my mouse, it snaps itself to the center. Right here, you can see when I leave my mouse, it snaps itself to the center. Right here, you can see when I leave my mouse, it snaps itself to the center. What is that? To start off with something like, for example, let's build a few divs. So I'm going to say something like width of 100. Hopefully that is available. Height of, let's say, 48. Then a peachy gray 800, something like that. Right, it looks like it's just way too big, so probably something like, or maybe it's not available. That's a very possible explanation. Yep. I'm going to do a bunch of divs with different colors, clean, right? And I'm going to give this upper div. So what this means is that this is now flexbox, and you can see that obviously it does not follow our widths set in flexbox, right? So what I can say is something like overflow x auto, which just means that hey, you're allowed to scroll out of the original width of your container. And finally, allow this element to actually use its own width instead of just shrinking to fit. What I can say is flex shrink 0, right? So the moment I say that, you can see now this area is scrollable instead of just getting shrink down to the individual widths. Awesome. So now, right now you can see in terms of scrollable, this does not do much except for scrolling. So in order to add those snap possibilities, what we can do is give it a direction first of all. So I'm going to snap this into X direction by saying, right? So this sets certain properties which are required for enabling the scroll snap in CSS. But you're going to see that still does not work because you have to give where that particular element should snap on an individual level. In this case, let's say if I give it snap of center, you can see now if I go ahead and try to scroll, this green over here snaps out center, right? When I scroll and I leave my mouse. Similarly, there's a red over here snaps out center as well. Similarly for blue, and similarly for the last one, yellow. If I change the direction from snap center to snap start, you're going to see it starts to snap and start. Similarly for green, you can see it snaps and start and so on. So if you give it something like space x of 4, for example, you can see now it is like much nicer in terms of visibility. And even if you give it a nice scroll thing, you can see it always lands in the starting part of the activity, right? That's awesome. You can also add a margin, a scroll margin to it. So you can see the scroll ML6 creates a left margin of 6 units. So if I go ahead and give this to all the divs over here, you're going to see that now they pretty much have a 6 units of snap margin to themselves. And if I match this with the SpaceX, that is the padding, this would pretty much mean that, you just keep that area to itself. That is snap to the white area instead of the actual boundary of the area. So yep, that's pretty much it for scrolling in CSS with Tailwind scrolling and snapping. Awesome. So now its own width instead of just shrinking to fit. What I can say is flex, shrink, shrink.
पहले हम ऊपर वाले डिव को ओवरफ्लो कर देंगे ना उसका एक्साइट ओवरफ्लो एक्स एक्सिस पे जो है वो ऑटो कर दो भाई साहब नेम डिव का डिव में
Right, 0. Right. So the moment I say that, you can see now this area is scrollable instead of just getting shrink down to the individual widths. Awesome. So now, right now you can see in terms of scrollable, this does not do much except for scrolling. So in order to add those snap possibilities, what we can do is give it a direction first of all. So I'm going to snap this into X direction by saying that, right? So this sets certain properties which are required for enabling the scroll snap in CSS. But you're going to see that still doesn't work because you have to give where that particular element should snap on it.
इसको बताना पड़ेगा कि लगाना है हर डिव में
An individual level. In this case, let's say if I give it a snap offset,
snap center snap start snap and
you can see now if I go ahead and try to scroll, this green over here snaps out center, right? When I scroll and I leave my mouse. Similarly, there's a red over here snaps out center as well. Similarly for blue and similarly for the last one, yellow. If I change the direction from snap center to snap start, you're gonna see it starts snap and start. Similarly for green, you can see it snaps at start and so on. So if you give it something like space X of 4, for example, you can see now it is like much nicer in terms of visibility. And even if you give it a nice scroll thing, you can see it always lands in the starting part of the bullet, right?
Yes. Four.
That's awesome. You can also add a margin, a scroll margin to it. So you can see the scroll ML6 creates a left margin of 6 units. So if I go ahead and give this all of the things over here, you're going to see now they pretty much have a 6 units of snap margin to themselves. And if I match this with the SpaceX, that is the padding, this would pretty much mean that, you just keep that area to itself and just snap to the white area instead of the actual boundary of the area. So yep, that's pretty much it for scrolling.
हम इसमें मार्जिन भी ऑन कर सकते हैं ऐड कर सकते हैं स्क्रॉल मार्जिन
In CSS with Tailwind scrolling and snapping the scroll. So pretty exciting, pretty neat feature about Tailwind version 3. So yep, that's pretty much it for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one really soon. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, we're going to take a look at how to build a simple sort of pretty much it for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one really soon.
ये मजे का पार्ट है जिसमें आप लोग खुद करेंगे तो पता लगा द मेन एलिमेंट शोड स्नैप हॉरिजॉन्टली स्नैप इन नेक्स्ट डायरेक्शन तो हम यहाँ पे लगा देंगे ओवरफ्लो एक्स पहले ही है तो यानी कि वो उसको स्क्रॉल करने की हमें ऑप्शन दे रहा है लेकिन ये लिखना ऐसे यानी कि यहाँ पे मर्जी रोक दो उसको आधी डी उसकी रोक दो आधी डी उसकी रोक दो इस चीज़ को खत्म करने के लिए होता है ये स्नैप एक्स लग गया लेकिन अभी भी अप्लाई नहीं होगा क्योंकि अभी हमने यहाँ पे लिखा ही नहीं है कि कितना स्नैप करना है तो यहाँ पे हम सारों को देखते हैं कितना लगाना होगा फाइव एलिमेंट शोड स्नैप एट द सेंटर तो यहाँ पे हमने स्नैप का लिखना भी है सारों चारों 5 में पहले स्पेस देंगे फिर लिखेंगे स्नैप देखिएगा आप सेंटर में लिखेंगे जो भी टिक लिखेंगे ये तो अपनी से जा रही है स्नैप सेंटर में तो काम ही नहीं किया स्नैप सेंटर इसको शुरू में लिखें फिर काम करेगा तो लिख दिया उसने शुरू कर दिया को सही से नहीं पता लग रही। स्टार्ट करके देखते हैं फिर से स्नैप का फीचर स्टार्ट कर दिया ना। अब जैसे ही वो हाफ से आगे चला जाएगा ना तो वो अगले को ले आएगा। ये मैंने छोड़ दिया यहाँ पे, मैंने छोड़ दिया। मैंने कहा बस डेव को ही बोलेगा स्टार्ट कर। देखा ना यहाँ ऐसे करके छोड़ो, ज़्यादा करके छोड़ूंगा तो यार डेव की स्टार्ट ही आएगी इसके अंदर। नाइस फीचर। All the five elements of the center को पूरा ना मैंने स्टार्ट ही लिख दिया। वही अपने चेक करने के बाद उसका टारगेट भी तो पूरा करो। किया नहीं। अब करो रन को टेस्ट। Shadows. Continue to next items. और shadows। ये बेसिकली हम न्यू फीचर्स कर रहे हैं। 3:30 हो गए, नमाज भी पढ़नी है। Tailwind CSS best है यार, best that's always सब्सक्राइब टू प्रोग्राम कैसे करें, वही पैसे ही नहीं है। गया ना 30 मिनट का है, 2 वीडियो में 5 एक्सरसाइज यूज ब्लड डार्क मोड यूजिंग तो डार्क मोड भी वैसे आसानी से हो जाता होगा, देखते हैं कैसे होता है। हो गया, अल्लाह हाफिज़ करते हैं दोस्तों, इंशाल्लाह कल को मिलते हैं। शायद अभी नमाज़ पढ़ने के बाद, रोज़ा रखने के बाद याद हूँ, अगर नींद ना आ रही है तो टेलमेंट ख़त्म करनी है। कल से हमने वही करना है, एक दिन में कुछ टेलमेंट होगी और कल रात और परसों रात को हमारा ख़त्म हो जाएगा। तो हमने ये 2 दिनों में ना वो रिएक्ट मुकानी है, ख़त्म करनी है सारी, मुका देनी चाहिए। एंड